Hi, I'm Scott from Goldwing Dogs. Today we're going to talk about something that everybody should know how to do, yet I see so many people doing it wrong, and that's stopping your motorcycle. Coming up next. Whew, it's hot out here today. So obviously you know how to stop your motorcycle because you squeeze the brakes, press the foot pedal, your bike comes to a stop. Yet so many people still do this very simple thing wrong because stopping is such a delicate balance. I see so many people that come up to an intersection and they do things like this. I see so many people that they're not so sure about when they come up to a stop that the bike isn't going to fall over because they're not comfortable riding slowly. So you'll see them dragging their feet along the ground as they come to a stop like this. And the same thing goes when they start off. They're not confident that the bike isn't going to fall over at slow speeds. So when they start off, they kind of drag their feet along the ground. Sometimes they'll walk it a bit, just like this. The problem with that is that if your foot catches on something on the ground, it can actually throw you off balance. And at that slow speed, you don't have enough gyroscopic force keeping you upright to keep you from falling over. So it's actually a dangerous thing to do.
Of course, then we have some riders who cover up their total lack of ability to ride the motorcycle to a safe stop by simply not stopping at all. You'd be really surprised at how many of these I saw in just a short amount of time watching.
What you should do and what you should really work to try to learn to do correctly is bring the bike to a perfect stop such that it just comes to a stop perfectly balanced. You can gently put your foot down when the bike is not even moving anymore. Similarly, when you're starting off from a stop, you should start off gently but firmly such that the bike starts moving, it's balanced, it's stable, and as soon as the bike starts moving, you can just take your feet up instead of walking along or dragging your feet just in case. The best way to come to a stop like that is to make sure that when the bike comes to a stop, your brakes aren't being applied anymore. Now, how does that work? Let me explain. So when you want, I'm going to put my helmet on the ground so I don't drop it. When you are braking your bike, you're going to compress the front suspension. That's what this job is. That's what it's supposed to happen. The front wheel gets pressed down, the suspension gets pushed in. You can see if I can do it just by pushing my bike and applying the brakes, you can see it. It grabs and absorbs that impact. The problem is when that suspension compresses, it also has to rebound. There's springs in there. You may have heard the rule that always have your steering exactly straight ahead when you come to a stop. Now, the suspension is the reason for that. There's nothing wrong with coming to a stop and having your steering turned. And if you use the technique I'm about to show you, you can do that every time with no problem. Coming to a stop, turn the handlebars, and come to a stop, let it turn. See? You can do it. The problem is if you brake in such a way that when you hold your brakes on, the bike comes to a stop and the brakes are still applied, and then the suspension rebounds, that's where the problem occurs. Because if your steering is turned and that suspension rebounds, it's not rebounding straight along the longitudinal axis of the bike. And that's what normally happens. If I push this along and I hit the brakes, it bounces back this way. That's no problem. The bike isn't going to fall over backwards. But if I turn the steering this way, and I'm not going to do it because I don't want to dump my bike, but I've turned the steering one way and then hit the brakes, compress the suspension. Now the suspension is compressed, the bike comes to a stop, the suspension rebounds, but it's rebounding this way, off in an angle. What happens when you have an 800 or 900 pound motorcycle being suddenly shoved one direction, sideways? Well, I can tell you what happens. The bike's going to fall over, because you are not going to rescue that bike from falling over. You're not going to stop 800 or 900 pounds of bike suddenly being shoved sideways. That's why when you see people at intersections, they come to a sudden stop and they have to turn because of something, and they come to a stop turned because there's a panic stop. The next thing you see happening is them hopping off the bike as it tumbles onto the ground. So the method I'm going to show you here is going to help you learn not to do that. The idea is that you can brake as hard as you want, but the slower the speed of the bike, the less brake you apply. So the idea is you can brake hard, but as the bike almost comes to a stop, you start letting off of the brakes slowly and gradually. So as the bike is slowing, the brakes come off. The idea being that the brakes come off entirely exactly when the bike comes to a complete stop. If you do this properly, the suspension unloads gradually as you come to a stop. And when the bike actually comes to a complete stop, the suspension is already unloaded and there's no rebound, which means you can come to a stop with the steering turned. It's not going to rebound sideways. The bike is not going to fall over. So let me show you braking hard with the bike. I'm going to brake hard as I come up. I'm going to keep a constant pressure on the brakes as I come up and to a stop. I'll put a camera on the suspension so you can see what happens there as well. All right, now let's have a look. What happens is when I gradually let off the brakes as the bike comes to a stop. Have a look and notice what I can do with my feet when this happens. I'm not saying you're going to be able to go out and do this tomorrow. It does take a lot of practice, and what you should do is practice this every time you come to a stop, because the more you do it, the better you'll get at it. I've done this for years and years and years. I've been riding motorcycles for 35 years, and so I do it every time I stop, and I don't even have to think about it anymore. It's automatic. That said, I don't do it every time because I'm not perfect. I am human, so sometimes I screw it up, but I do make a point of practicing it every single time I stop my bike, because I want to be able to ride my bike accurately and precisely and in a controlled manner. This is a video that I've actually intended to make for over a year, and circumstances have caused it not to occur, but I'm finally glad I got it done. I hope this is of some help to you. If you like what you saw, please click like, subscribe, click that little bell. It really helps us out when you do that. If you have questions or comments, something you do, maybe you disagree, or maybe you found a better way of doing this, leave it in the comments section below. And of course, don't forget to check out the Goldwing Docs website. 94,000 Goldwing owners just like you. Friendly people just waiting to say hello or help you with any problems you might have. Thanks for watching. This is going to be ridiculous because I know it's going to take me 10 times to get the shot right. Let's watch Scott screw up riding and dump his bike on camera. I'm sure that's what we're about to see. That wasn't it either. This is harder than it looks, trying to get it stopped right in front of the camera. Wow, it's hot. My gosh, I'm sweating on all this gear with no wind, just going around and around in circles in a parking lot. Look at that, I managed to do it without dumping my bike. We'll call that a win.